Welcome, everybody. Again, this is the TLTR Teaching Learning Technology Roundtable. The idea is we want to have an open faculty forum to talk about a variety of issues as we go through the academic year. And today we've landed on having Robert Caldwell and Steve Nichols talk a little bit. Steve's going to talk a little bit about assessment, I think, and Robert's going to share his Canvas shell and talk a little bit about sort of how he conceptualizes and puts his courses together, just to give you all kind of a peek into the thought processes. So without further ado, we'll go with you, Robert?
That sounds good. Hi,
Sure.
everyone.
Let me give you co-host so you can share screen.
I think I have that permission.
Oh, okay, good. Okay, go.
All right. So my name's Robert Caldwell. Good to see many faces that I know already. I'm a business faculty here at the college. And let me share what we're going over today. So there's three things kind of three parts here. First, I'll show an independent. So my focus, I really wanted to focus on two things, really was projects, how I build out my projects in my classes. And then the other focus kind of being on that outcomes assessment. So I'll show two projects, an independent project for my Management 2100 course, and then a group project that is actually in an online capacity, fully online course, group project, in our Business 1000 Introduction to Business course. And then the last part will be actually showcasing our outcomes assessment rubric that we developed at last year's Summer Assessment Academy with myself, Liliana Peterson, and Tammy Madsen. And so we'll showcase our assessment rubric that we developed and then show you how we actually integrated that into Canvas through one of our pilot courses. All right. So the first one is actually looking at our Management 2100. And in this class, I developed a independent research project. Let me find it. So this project, what I do is I first start off with, I consider this a quarter-long project. I usually start the projects after the census date. So normally week 3 or week 4 is where I start the project and kind of let students settle into the course. And I have a pretty similar template that I use or format that I use. I usually have a video introducing the project where I kind of go over verbally all the expectations. I'm usually reviewing maybe a project guide on that, similar to like what I would do in a classroom, but this way in a virtual environment. So that way students have the opportunity not just to read the expectations, but also to hear from me verbally. And then, of course, I'll put all the expectations and so forth out here. With all of my projects, I develop a milestone template. So I teach business, and business, a good business practice would have, if you have a project, you would have milestones attached to that. So I try to mimic that to the academic environment to where we have staggered dates of due dates related to work that either needs to be handed in or suggested milestones. And so the first one, I always have some sort of proposal that's due early. I do this because I like the idea of having students be thinking about engaging with the project early versus procrastinating and waiting to the last minute to actually start the project. So in this case, I had a research proposal that's due early in the course. And then somewhere towards the end, I actually have them in this project, have them do a literary review. And then I have a draft paper suggested milestone before the final paper submission towards the end of the course. So that's a pretty standard that I do is I do milestones that are laid out for the students. to help keep them on track and make sure they're making progress throughout the term. I also usually have a set of resources that I provide. Now, these are either resources that I develop myself or from my colleagues, my peers in the business department. We've developed some templates that we could provide to the student to help them, with the formatting and so forth. So in this case, I usually, with the proposal, I provide a proposal template. And then in this case, I even had pre-approved question banks that they can, use for their research, because they would need to get approval of their research topic in this instance. And then with all of my projects, I have a completion guide. And the completion guide, and I can show you that really quickly without going too deep into it, but you can kind of see I go into really deep detail of what it is I'm looking for, what are the expectations for you to do the guides, for you to do the project successfully. So it really just helps translate. I think clear expectations always helps enable student success on the project. So that's why I always provide those completion guides. In this instance, I also I provided an external resource, which is to the library website. Sometimes I have external websites and so forth that on there that I think will be helpful. And then I even developed a library website, how to use the website demo video. It's like 10 or 15 minutes. Because for many of these students, it might be their first time going into that website using that tool. And so I wanted to show them, if they choose, how to use that. In addition, I have a rubric, a grading rubric that's embedded into the Canvas shell. And so that way the students have clear expectations of in this case is just the research proposal. But at each milestone, with each thing that they're handing in, which all milestones have a grade, there'll be a rubric there that they can review and understand, okay, what are the point allocations and how do I earn my grade for that particular assignment. So that is the independent project, and I can kind of go back to my modules here. And I can show you, I build in my milestones as I think it's module 7. Yep, you have your module 7. I have another milestone here, literary review. It's all the same, except for I highlighted a different. With a lit review, I do use Turnitin, which is a software that we can use as faculty to detect plagiarism. And I think that's the same thing with my final project milestone. I think I used Turnitin again. Yep. So you can get an idea of what that looks like for the course. And then you can see the rubric here for the final paper. Okay, let's turn to the team projects. So team projects are, I use, again, a similar format, a lot of description with, in this case, I always, again, resources I think is important. So I have templates here that I developed. So this project here is a business plan. They're working as a group. This could be an on-campus in-person class, or it could be an online class. In this case, I'm showing you one that's done online because I think that it's important for us maybe to see how a team project can be done successfully in an online environment, which I think for some students and for some faculty might be a little hesitant to do that because they're not in person, but I've seen it be done successfully many times, and I'll show you how I do it. First, again, providing the resources. So I have a project guide. Again, several pages, milestone descriptions, points breakdown. They can see everywhere where they can earn a grade, and then the rubric as well. So try to keep it pretty thorough, and so that way if they want the extra information to make sure they understand what my expectations, it's there for them. Again, templates are there. So I have the business plan template that they must use. with a purpose, a little bit of description of what it is. Okay. Now with the team projects, I always have them have, and I think this is a really important part of it, a team introduction. So I actually have a discussion post. I think it's worth 10 or 20 points. The point of the post is to have them go in there. They talk about their skills. What do I bring to the table? A little bit about me. It's private within their groups that have been set up in Canvas, and I can show you how to set that up as well. But now inside of that discussion post, I also ask them to exchange information or to discuss their communication preferences. Do they want to, a lot of times students work via text or phone. Sometimes they get on Zoom or Teams. But the point of that introduction post is to get the ball rolling, making sure that students are engaging with each other. And they're accountable because of the point allocation. And so that has been to me is a really important part of it in an online class, to have that team introduction. In my in-person classes, I don't do the team introduction because we're in person and the students are meeting face to face. I want to make sure that they're quickly moving into really thinking about their project. And again, with this, I make them submit a proposal and a team charter. So the proposal is they're proposing their idea. It doesn't have to be a fully fleshed out idea, but they're telling me in a half a page what it is they want to, what business do they want in this case, what business do they want to develop? It's a mock business. And then why? What experience are they bringing to the table? What drew them to this idea? So, and then I would either approve or I'd provide feedback for them to come back and revise that proposal depending on what they submitted. I'd also have them submit a team charter. So on project teams, it's best practice to have a charter. Charters basically outline who's on the project, what are the roles, who's doing what, roles, responsibilities, and it also helps them think about their goals. What are their goals when it comes to timeline? What are their goals related to, quality standards, objectives, and so forth? So it really forces the team. And it's not a lengthy exercise either. It's something that can be done in 30 to 45 minutes. Teams get together. It's a 1 or 2 page thing that they can just, and we provide them the template. They can work through it, answer some questions that they should be thinking about. How are we communicating? When should we have things done? Who's responsible for what? So it's important things, especially in a virtual environment, that they have those expectations early. And then from there, they have a month to actually do assuming that their proposals are approved, they have a month to actually put this project together, which is plenty of time. And here I give another suggested. I almost always suggest working with the Writing Center at the end, having a draft, working the Writing Center. My experience is, and I'm sure you guys have seen this as well, students who work with this Writing Center across all proficiency levels tend to get better grades on their assignments because the Writing Center provides a lot of meaningful feedback, in my opinion, to improving their paper, especially, in business communication is an important aspect of business to being successful. So try to emphasize that. Some students take advantage of it, some don't. And then you have your last milestone, which is the actual submission with a team peer evaluation. So I always inform the students early, there's going to be a peer evaluation. You get points just for submitting it, but what I want to do is I want to hear about, okay, are all the students contributing? Doesn't necessarily have to be equal, but it needs to be in an equitable way where everyone's contributing meaningful work to the final result. In a team project, as we know, sometimes students drop off for whatever reason. If that's the case, I want to know that. And that way, they're not free riding themselves to the A on the backs of the other students that did all the work. So I think it's about accountability. I think it's about fairness with the teams. And that way everyone feels comfortable in understanding that there's accountability to all the members to the project. And I think that knowing the accountability, I think adds to the seriousness and responsiveness to the students in the team. So I've ran this a few quarters with, it's, always when it's in person, it's much easier. Online, I've run this a few quarters and it's been fairly successful. Steve, you have a comment or question?
Question.
Sure.
How much of the grade on the project comes from the peer evaluation?
I think it's like 25 points. So it might be, so I want to say it's about 200 points. So maybe 25 points of that comes from the peer evaluation, just from submitting it. And the peer evaluation, though, informs.
What if somebody says, Joe didn't do a thing?
Right.
We tried to encourage Joe. Joe didn't participate. All he did was show up at the last day and put his name on the project.
Yep. So what I will do is I will look at the peer evaluations. I try to encourage students also earlier. I keep reminders out there. I do announcements, emails. If students are dropping off, they're not working or engaging at all, I want to know as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm.
If students, in my cases, if students don't do any of the work, are not communicating, working with the team at all, or very little, they don't receive a grade on that final. That's a 0. It's not fair to the other participants and the team that do all the work where they get the A or B or whatever they've earned.
Sure.
So they have to earn it. I think that's a part of college, part of being a team member is earning your grade. Now, if they do some of the work, if students are maybe given half credit, saying, they contributed, but they really didn't contribute very much, there might be a sliding scale and it just varies case by case. So it really just varies. So I think as instructors, we have to be able to assess that and make judgment calls based on what the students collectively are telling you.
Yeah. On my peer eval, I have 3 areas. Off the top of my head, I'm struggling to find them. Cooperation, attendance at meetings. Anyway, and on 1 through 5 scale. So it's possible to get 100%, or it's possible to get 15, 20, somewhere, some percentage beyond 0 and all, right? And in my classes, on my group projects, that peer evaluation is 40% of the grade. It used to be 20. And then one day, this student said to me, I was the only one that worked on this for the whole thing. I said, well, there's a peer eval. And I won't share with you the language that he used, but it amounted to big deal. It's 20%. They get 80% for nothing. I said, you know what? You're right. And so I changed that to 60-40. And when I introduce the project, I say, if you ace this from my perspective, you're going to get 60% of the available points. If you're not a good team player, that may be where you end up. So it's up to you to participate in your group to earn the rest of those points. And I've been doing it like that for a long time. And what I've discovered is I don't think I've ever had a case where there was a personality conflict or somebody didn't like somebody or all of the things that we worry about. They really called balls and strikes accurately, and it mattered. And so, I would encourage people who are looking to add peer evaluation as a grading component on group projects that you make it significant, that you make it enough to encourage participation, right? There has to be some incentive to participate. Not always. Some people are intrinsically motivated, but the reality is that a lot of them aren't. And I think that the more you make it a value, the more people participate. Anyway, that's my 2
I
cents.
totally agree with that as well. And I'm interested to see maybe yours at some point, Steve.
Yeah, I'll send it to
But I
you.
do like that scale, the kind of Likert scale. For me, I think that students will be removed from the group. It won't flunk them individually, but they will lose the points.
Yeah.
If they don't participate, they could get a 0. I mean, that's the consequence. And I try to make that clear up front.
Well, and
on
what
the
what I
project,
say on the form is that if you're going to give somebody no peer points, you
right?
have to explain to me how you tried to encourage them to participate, what assignments you gave them that they ignored and things like that. So they can't just drop a, you know, zero on somebody's head. There has to be some explanation behind it. And as I said, over the years, it's really been pretty effective. So
If I may, Rob, Liliana Peterson. Thank you so much, Steve and Rob, for sharing. I want to mention that in my classes, I also increase the points, as Steve mentioned. So it's about 20% of the group project points. Also, I decided to not use the grading setting as to giving the same points to all students. And so they have about 40 points max for the peer evaluation, and which is about 20% of the total points again. But I also asked them to edit in the title of each PowerPoint slide in parentheses their first name. So then I know where they participated, because it happened to me about until 2 years ago. One of them, let's say, was taking an interview. Another one was editing on a Word document. Another one was preparing the PowerPoint. So now, since 2 years, I proceed with equal efforts for everything to participate in developing, editing their own specific sections, developing the PowerPoint. So I would like to see which part was developed by whom. So for the project, in addition to a differentiation in the total points accumulated for the project per student, for the differentiation, I took into consideration the peer evaluation and also what they present in a Word document or PowerPoint. They add their first name in parentheses, because I want to, assess correctly the effort of each student. And it's working for the same group project. They get different points.
Yeah, I like that too. That's a really interesting and good approach, I think, too. So I think ultimately accountability matters, right? And having a peer review and other types of strategies, I think, would be a good practice, especially I think online, where maybe again, it might be a little more challenging to assess whether students are engaging. I think we have to rely on measures like a team evaluation or hearing from our students to let us know if students aren't participating. So I think that really, I think all the pieces, though, I think the proposal, the charter, the introduction discussion, all the components themselves helps create a successful environment for an online group project. And so that's just the approach that I take. A lot of that was taken from, I mean, I don't want to take full credit. I mean, there's a lot of our business faculty that a lot of are implementing the same or similar strategies for implementing these projects in the classes. Any questions on the projects, individual or group projects, before I move into the outcomes assessment?
Rob, one more question, if we can share. How do you select, or how do we select all of them, all of us, the leaders? I usually let them decide who is the leader of the group. We have that option on Canvas to select one of the leader, but usually I ask them to send me an email. I also give 10 bonus points to the leader, which is not much out of 1,000. And another aspect, I'm asking afterwards the leader and each one of the team members to send me separately an email on how the project went towards the end of the quarter, and to tell me if there are any issues. I noticed that the students who are not participating at all or too much, they're actually very honest, and in the peer evaluation, actually they edit that this is happening. So I didn't had problems with pretending that they participated and they didn't. They're open about it. So how do you select the leaders? Or
I don't select leaders, so I allow the students to self-select who is the project manager. And so there's different assign roles that they can determine what their roles are. Different groups do it differently, and I let them self-select. What I will speak to is how I select the students for who's in whose group. And what I normally do, well, if you go into, I don't know if people have not done this before, you can go to the Peoples tab in Canvas, and then you can select your project groups. In this case, I have 6, pretty large class, but I normally like to keep the groups with between 3 and 4, 5 is a max. That's what I like to do. And what I do is I actually go into, with a group project, this one I start around midterm, a little before midterm, week 4 or 5. So that way I have enough grading that's come in to have a general idea of who's the higher achievers, at least so far. And so that way I'm trying to build a balanced group, okay, based upon who's on the class roster. And so normally I go down and I look at how are students engaging, and that's how I will piece together my group. The groups for the project teams is looking at kind of the students that are getting A's on everything versus those who are maybe, you know, struggling to keep up and so forth. So that way there's not any lopsided groups with all really, really strong students versus all students that maybe are struggling to, you know, keep up or pass the course. So that is an approach I take. I definitely wait till at least with a group project, at least week 4. So that way I know, of course, past the census date, get an idea of where students are. A general gauge is, of course, at week 4 is nothing's solid at that point, but I'm trying to do the best I can to make sure it's an equitable, balanced groups for the project. So does that answer your question, Liliana?
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Rob. I usually have 4 in a group. Sometimes they withdraw or something happens. So I think just 3 in a group is insufficient. Often we are left with 1 or 2 in a group. So 4 is a good number for me based on my experience. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, so for me, I think that honestly, I think if it goes down to 2, I think that's still okay. That's my preference. And I've had students that are totally okay with that. So 3 is the minimum that I assign them to. And if it goes down to 2, I still allow that group to move forward if they feel comfortable. But ideally for me, I think 3 to 4.
One last question, Rob. Your procedure when a student is not participating at all, I will share from my courses. It is in the syllabus. By week 6, the student who did not participate almost at all will receive an individual project with the same topic and with 30% off the points based on lack of using the opportunity to develop teamwork, communication, networking skills, and so forth. So it might happen in week 6, I withdraw from a group and will appear in people's link individual project with the date. And again, they have the same thing to do by the end of the quarter with 30% off.
Yeah,
How do you
so
proceed?
I appreciate you sharing that. So the way that it works is if the group informs me that a student is totally dropped off early, that they will potentially be removed from the group, we try to communicate with the student. So I encourage that, okay, have you reached out? How many engagements have you had? Usually after 2 or 3 engagements, they're not hearing from the student, I will remove them from the group. I will reach out to the student. I will give them the option if they have to engage with me. That's the way that I do it. That they can work with me to talk about what they can do to make up some of the work that, since they were removed from the group, make up some of those points. And so they could do the project independently, or usually that's what it is. I would assess that depending on at what point they reach out to me. So, in what I feel is doable. So I take that as a case by case, but ideally, if they reach out to me immediately, I'll allow them to do that project independently. So of course, they would lose those extra points on the
Peer
either the
evaluation.
proposal, the charter, the things that they didn't engage with. Yeah. So
Robert, before you move on, there's a question in the chat from Scott about what you do when students ask to swap groups, if that comes up.
I don't. I assign group members, and I personally, I've had students ask before. I should take that back. I have had students that were friends. They were taking a class together. Now this was in person, not online, and they asked if they could be a group. And my approach was, I was hesitant to, because of what I felt was important is that we're understanding how to work with people that maybe we're not familiar with working with, such as like in a professional team. So the way I approach that, I'm not necessarily opposed to that. I think this is in this instance, this is how I did it. First off, they wanted to be a two-person group. I said, nope, the groups are usually 4. So, really they needed to be divvied randomly based upon, how I normally do it. I didn't want to make any special arrangements for anyone. So so I think it's a conversation with the student about your approach, and that's basically how I approached it. Does that answer your question? There might be other faculty that do allow that to happen. I'm not necessarily, I suppose I could be maybe convinced, but I felt in that instance I think it's important to be fair across all the students and to have this groups assigned the way that it was intended, that I intended it to be, which was at random based upon, student performance. So
Yeah, it's not happened too often. And again, discussion with the student and explaining that, like you mentioned, Rob, in my case, the same, to try to work with different people to get used with such situations. And most of the time, I would say 90% of the cases, they accept, okay, I get your point, and they decide to quit their request. So they go with the initial team. So I don't see a big problem or too many times happening.
yeah, I think it's just you have to explain your reasoning behind the group development, how you're structuring the groups, and it's all about fairness. And really the purpose of group projects, the outcomes of the project itself is important, but also we're building those soft skills of working in teams, which in business is very important because it's a lot of team collaboration, sometimes with people you don't know or you may not like or have a perfect working relationship with. So that's kind of one of those intangibles of a group assignment that doesn't necessarily come out when it's, well, we're friends and we want to work together. So, but as there are other questions, I do want to get to the outcomes assessment. I think I'm ready for that. So other questions on the projects. Okay. So the second half of this, we're going to focus on assessment, specifically with outcomes assessment for one of our classes. This was a project that we did, myself, Liliana Peterson, who's on the call here today, and then Tammy Madsen, all of us business faculty. And what we did is we looked at, as part of our 2023 last summer's assessment academy, we decided to look at examining the Management 2100 course. And we really wanted to focus on course level assessment as our focus. In this Management 2100 course, there's 6 course level objectives. And what we did in this academy is we first did an analysis, and we ultimately decided that this one, CLO6, which relates to the control function of management, was the one that we wanted to focus on because we felt like maybe there was some gaps in how we're measuring our students proficient. So there's lots of different ways that you can do assessment, and Steve can talk about that because he's the expert there. But a lot of times you can do like pre and post assessments and so forth. It's very common. You can look at quiz, exams, discussions. We decided that we want to do something really robust with this one because we felt that it's an important topic that's maybe students weren't performing as high on with test scores. And so we said, you know what, we really want to make sure that we're developing an activity with an assessment that's really robust and meaningful to the student learning. And so what we developed was this assessment rubric, which would be tied to an activity, which I'll show you in just a few minutes. And what we did is Liliana, myself, and Tammy collaborated. And we also, before we did this, I want to mention, we talked to Cindy Catherwood. That was a part of the process, is that, we looked at, okay, this part of our process, we're going to talk with Cindy, at that time, Lynn Bradman, let them know that this is the focus that we wanted to work on. And they really kind of gave their voice of approval of what we were trying to achieve. So I want to put that in there because I felt like that was a part of the process before we did outcomes assessment. We really did want to make sure that academic affairs, particularly Cindy and Lynn, now Steve, were aware of what we were doing. So once we had that approval, that green light, we made that a part of our academy. And so our process was this. We knew what our course level objective was. This was written before our project started. And what we did is we looked at this and we broke it down into what we thought were 4 meaningful skills or objectives that we felt were, if those were achieved, that would be attaining a good measure of proficiency for meeting this objective. So we broke this down, and you can read that on your screen. And then what we did is we broke it down. Now, outcomes assessment, you're not giving a grade. What you're doing is you're measuring across a level of proficiency. So in this case, we looked at 3 measures: insufficient, sufficient, and mastery. Mastery, think of that as a high degree of understanding. Sufficient, think of that as an average or acceptable range of understanding that's been demonstrated. And insufficient would be, below average or unacceptable. And we provided some, and then we wrote this. We wrote what we thought collectively would be, what that sufficient, insufficient, and mastery would look like to help the instructor when they were completing this rubric, to help them understand where did the student fall on this level of proficiency. So that is how we developed this outcomes assessment rubric. And really, in the end, what you do as an instructor is you have some sort of assignment or activity that you're looking at, and then you're measuring across each of these and rating them either an M, S, or an I, not a grade, but looking at just this proficiency. So we then tied this into a Canvas shell as a practice. Ron Eastman's on the call. We got a few people from IDS. What I want to emphasize is that if instructors are interested in doing outcomes assessment in Canvas, they should be collaborating with, or keeping aware with Ron and at the IDS department, especially as you want to widen that and do that across multiple courses. You want to make sure that they understand what you're doing and that you're in there doing this. That is a part of the process as well, is working with them if you want to integrate this into Canvas. Okay, so that being said, let me bring up my screen here in my Canvas shell. So the project that we integrated this with, I'm not going to go too deep on, is a video presentation. Students pick out a control tool, and they select one, and then they answer some questions in a video presentation. That's the project. But what I want to show you is the rubric and how it looks integrated into Canvas. So you can see here, this is our grading rubric. Do you see my cursor? So you can see this is an actual grade. So it's 100 points, and you can see how the grades are allocated across different criteria that have been outlined as the grading. In addition to that, the students can see this and the instructor can see this. Embedded in there is the outcomes rubric. And you can see here, there's it's a separate rubric, but when it looks on the screen to the student, they see it as one. And so you can see here they have mastery, sufficient, insufficient, or not assessed. It's a 0 if it's just not a part of that activity. And then that score would go in there. Okay, and so when the instructor goes into grade, they would grade your grading, and then they would also complete the grading, the outcomes assessment rubric at the same time. Now, we did this as a pilot. So I did this in a course. Liliana has done this in a few different courses. We're kind of testing this out before we possibly bring this wider into all of the Management 2100 classes. So we haven't done that yet. But what I love about doing this in Canvas is that we can pull this data very quickly and easily. And I want to show you what that looks like. So if you go into grades, so if you have your grade book up here. So this is how your grade book might look. But if you up here on this left-hand side, you'll see this grade book, and it'll be like a little caret down. Learning Mastery grade book is where you can see your outcomes assessment. And so what you can see here is the scores for the outcomes assessment. You can also export this into Excel. In my understanding, I have not done this because I'm not the lead over this course, but those with the full access should be able to at least work with Ron's or the IDS department to then pull a very quick and easy aggregated report across all sections that have integrated this activity. So it's a very, as long as the instructors are trained, I think that a couple important things that I think that to make this successful, the instructors need to understand what it is. That's your adjuncts, your full-time, for that to work successfully. They need to understand what it is, why you're doing it, why it's important, and how to actually score it. So I do think training is part of this process to have it be done successfully with your faculty. Whether it's a one-on-one conversation, just depends. But I think it is a verbal meeting conversation with those faculty that are administering this. I also think you need to allow students to understand what it is. So I think students are going to see it. It's not hidden from students. So I know with this class, I did this only in one case. This is only one use case for this. I explained to them, this is what it is. This is why we do it. It's just a part of it doesn't affect your grade. It's just a way for us faculty to allow us to improve what we're doing. And it's really about us. It's really about MCC ensuring that you guys are learning, but also informs us as faculty how to make improvements in our general way that we're teaching our classes. And the students they all understood it. And so that was just my experience with it. Of course, a small sample size, but I felt like those two pieces are really important if you ever do integrate outcomes assessment rubrics into your courses. I think it's important to communicate on both fronts. But yeah, so that's what it looks like in Canvas. For me, I think it's a really great comprehensive way to assess how we're doing, how the students are learning, how we're doing as faculty with teaching these important concepts. And yeah, so any questions about that? Or I know there's people from IDS here. I know Steve, you probably have some comments on this in addition, or?
I think it's great. I think that I think it's a great, in fact, I wrote in my notes, it's important, I think, for us to start simple. And I've looked at a lot of stuff in the last year and IPRs and things like that. And some of them are so overwhelmingly complicated. I don't know how we ever pull it off. I don't think among us girls, I don't think they're pulling it off. And I think that's our problem. There is, Cindy gave me this book last year. Hey, read this book. So I did. And Robert, I'm sure if you're done, I've sort of moved right in here and started
Go ahead.
talking. Okay. And so she talks about this simple plan for assessment, and I'm a believer. One simple direct and one simple indirect if you have the ability. There are areas in our organization that send a lot of graduates directly to employers, nursing, a lot of the medical people, a lot of the trades, directly to employers. If we're not polling them 6 months later and say, what are they good at? What are they bad at? We're missing a golden opportunity. One day I had lunch over at the bistro and they hand me a card that said, how do we do? Golden opportunity for indirect assessment. If we're not capturing those things, we're missing this opportunity. As far as a direct assessment, I like a major project, especially at the program level in the business area. If we did a comprehensive business plan requiring things from marketing and management and accounting, and we can measure the entire program with one project, we develop a rubric and we evaluate these projects every summer at the academy. It's a ready-made, simple project for the academy, and we have program assessment done. And then we can start to talk about, well, boy, every single one of these things we look at does a poor job at integrating marketing into their plan. And so what are we doing wrong when we talk about marketing then? How are we not communicating so they understand what it means for the business plan to have a marketing component in it? And then at the next academy, the curriculum academy, we adjust some curriculum. I don't mean to oversimplify it, but I'm clapping here. It can be that simple, right? We can just make it that simple. And the other way, if you don't have a major project available like we do in the business area, is a collection of smaller projects. For example, the accounting folks, they don't do a big project, but they do a project in every course. And so they could collect those in the portfolio. That portfolio, then we create a rubric to measure those projects based on assessment, not grading. And let me just a quick thing on assessment, not grading, right? And so if I take the business plan, right? And so the program level assessment that the business plan would speak to is can they create a report that communicates with the target audience, right? If I'm grading that project in intro to business class, I would be grading them on, did they get the form of business ownership right? Did they talk about the advantages and disadvantages of each? These very specific kind of businessy things. That's not what our PLO says yet. Maybe we should adjust it, but that's a different conversation. And so we would evaluate those projects based on how they meet our learning objectives, based on the rubric that we created. Again, so major project, you're in there. It's a simple thing to do. Lack of a major project, we can create a portfolio and require them to dump projects into that throughout the program. And then when we get to the end, we measure that. And then if you have an indirect, you do some employer question and answer or surveying, and man, and now all of a sudden we can identify what they're good at and what they miss, and then we can adjust curriculum, and before you know it, we have done the Holy Grail, right? We've completed the assessment cycle, or as we hate to call it, closed the loop. So that's it. That's my 5 minutes on how we can make this easy and effective. So
Rob, thank you so much for your presentation, Liana Peterson. And I have to say that Rob had this idea and he was playing with this assignment extra credit, something in his courses before. So we decided to use it as a pilot program. I just wanted to share that starting with this quarter, I have 2 management online, management 2100, and I decided to part of the pilot program to actually divide it again to see another way of using this wonderful assessment. And in module number 4, I introduce 4 pages written first part of this video assignment to edit the answer for the first 4 questions, starting with the history of the product, then applicability in which industry and how they might use this, why it's so useful. And I want to share a few tools that they choose. So it's about tools used in the project management, controlling process and so forth. So I have students this quarter choosing Trello, and another one is Power BI by Microsoft. Another one went and look at control process team collaboration tools such as Klaxon. So there are tools that they actually are using in the real business world. Another one is Kronos software, which is used for the workforce management. And there are many other examples. Another one use Microsoft Project and explore this tool, or another one is for the Salesforce, from the Salesforce company. And there are many examples. I don't see any duplication. Fortunately, they choose different products. However, they also learn how to develop a video. I know that Rob, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe initially was giving about 7 minutes to present. I thought about allowing only 2-3 minutes. So then, because they already submitted the questions for the first 4 questions. So I think it's working pretty well. I'm the online lead for management, so we have access as a team. If we form another team again with the same team during the summer, to collect the data, to see the results, analyze them, decide on the procedure, and if approved by the department, to go on and embed in all management 2100 this assessment. I think is very valuable.
Yeah, I would second that. I don't think my understanding when I was talking with Ron was that there's really not many faculty departments using that outcomes assessment. I don't know if David or Jessica, is that
Not-
widely
yeah,
used
not-
or is that new?
Yeah, it's not widely used yet here. I think as we move into what are they calling the college's new streamlining to more technology? They've got some initiative name for that.
Modernization.
There we go. Yeah, that's how could I miss that? The notion is that in the new CRM, our replacement for Illusion, that data, so we'll get more into outcomes, and then that data will also get transmitted over there, and then we can do, run big reports at the institution level. Accreditation bodies are looking more and more at outcomes and wanting to see that, kind of in a more salient way than just, well, this is what we've collected and here's, some things. They like to see automated reports. So that's coming. I don't know when, but yeah, give it a try. I mean, the outcome tools are in Canvas to do that. So
Excellent.
I know you're early in the project and you haven't done your analysis yet, but the thing about assessment of student learning outcomes to me is that it builds on instructors' curiosity about how their students are doing, right? And that's where really good projects start, is when you say, I wonder how people are doing. And so I'm just wondering if you have an initial impression of how your students are doing on that SLO number 6 that you're assessing this way.
That's a good question. So we chose that because that specific objective because I think it, you know, we pulled some data, we did analysis, and we really felt we didn't have anything comprehensive for it. And we also noticed on the exam questions, these are the questions that students were more commonly missing. So there was certainly a gap to begin with. With the development of the assignment itself, I feel very confident that we really put I think the assessment really made us focus on what are we doing? It made us so much more intentional about how are we helping narrow this gap, this learning gap. And so we integrated a very intentional assignment, really robust. They're doing a video presentation, they're looking, they're choosing. The students, the feedback I got, they really enjoyed the assignment. And I mean, looking at these scores, I can show them to you again. I think they did pretty good. Let me share my screen again. I mean, the scores across the board was a lot of greens and oranges. And oranges are anything above orange is good. Orange and above. So I felt the students did really well, and I feel like the assessment with the new assignment, that just like that extra focus on this, really, I think we have a stronger course because of it. And I think that the students are learning something that they normally might struggle with in a more meaningful way, an applied way versus like a test or something. So really good. That's just my Liliana. Do you have any perception on that as well? Because I know you've been running this a few times.
I got some notes from the students that they explore a list of all kinds of platforms and tools that they never heard before. And they actually edited more than 4 pages. The reason why I decided to introduce, out of 6 questions, the first four to actually approach them at the mid quarter is the fact that I noticed that some of the students would push this project and the video towards the end of the quarter when they didn't have sufficient time to actually study, select which tool, what is about, and then how to use a video, which they never did before. So they procrastinated too much and they didn't have time to provide a good video. They had anxiety about the video creation and anxiety about what tool to choose. So therefore, I wanted them to submit already their selection and knowledge of what it is, and then to focus on the last 2 questions and present the video, a shorter video, 2-3 minutes. They loved it, and I continue to learn about different tools. Some of them that I never used, some of them I had no idea that they're on the market. So it's ongoing learning. This, 2 ways. We learn from the students are learning from us. So I think it was very well received and is going better and better. I'm very happy about this. And again, I give you to you, Rob, the majority of the yay, because you came with this idea and you already had something developed. And I also want to mention that Rob is a PMP certified, project management professional certified by Project Management. Yay, 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 to celebrate. Yeah, good for you. I'm with project management, but I'm working towards this certificate. I'm keep pushing it. Not that I don't know the content, I just didn't take the exam yet. So thank you, Rob, and the whole team, and Steve and everybody, the SI team and everybody. We need to continue to improve this tool. But again, my applauses, and I'm usually I'm asking for towards perfection. I think we're on the right track with this one.
There's so much in there, and thanks, Liliana, that I want to have you all back to talk about assignment design too, because I was really intrigued by how you set up your assignment and all the milestones and the templates, and that's a whole nother TLTR, but we'll do that again soon. Thanks.
Yeah, are there any questions? Any other questions? No, well, thanks everybody. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Robert, for doing that and bringing that forward. And this is how this goes, right? So one of these TLTRs leads to another, leads to another.
Yeah.
So we hope to see you guys all again. Thank you very much.